Welcome to yet again another installment of Video Game Battle, the series where I take two games, compare them to each other in separate categories, and decide at the end which I think is the better game. So tonight's competitors are Jak Daxter, The Lost Frontier versus Ratchet Clank, Size Matters. After taking a look at two of the Jak and Ratchet spin-offs, Daxter and Secret Agent Clank, we now look at two other spin-offs that, unlike the other two, use the same formula from the original games. Both of these games were made by High Impact Games, who also did Secret Agent Clank. But the question is, which of these spin-offs lives up more to their original games? Well, that's why I'm here to see which one is the superior game. So let's get this battle begun. So for the stories of these games, Jak and Daxter The Lost Frontier has Jak, Daxter and Kira looking for a reason as to why all of the eco is draining from the world. They then encounter a sky pirate named Captain Phoenix, who is also seeking for the eco. After crash landing and fixing their plane back together, they later meet Duke Skywade of Europa, who gives them an item known as the Eco Seeker. Since Jak is unable to open it due to his eco powers, Kira is forced to study the item as long as Jak proves himself. Later in the story, Daxter will come across Dark Eco, which transforms himself into a dark mutant of himself, aka Dark Daxter. Ratchet & Clank Size Matters has Ratchet & Clank enjoying their vacation after many years of saving galaxies, until a little girl named Luna appears who wants Ratchet to help her with her school project on heroes. Later on, Luna is captured by unknown robots. Clank then comes across an artifact belonging to an ancient race called the Technomites. Even though Ratchet doesn't believe in their existence, the Jews set out to save Luna. Along the way, they encounter Captain Quark, who is in search of his birth parents and wants to find out his real family. Now, compared to the original games, the story in both games are pretty bland and forgettable, so this one is a tough one for me. I will probably have to go with Size Matters. Whilst the story was kinda generic, it did give us a few surprising plot twists, which is what you would usually expect in a Ratchet & Clank story. I'm not saying Lost Frontier's story was terrible, but it is disappointing when compared to Jak 2 and Jak 3, as it feels even more generic. But regardless of the winner, both games do have forgettable stories that don't live up that much to their original games. As for the designs, well, both games don't make up full use of the PSP's graphical capabilities. Jak and Daxter The Lost Frontier has you going through forests, pirate ships, caves and mines, and each of these levels do have some pretty detailed designs, though it would be nice to see more colourful environments just like in Jak and Daxter The Precursor Legacy. But still, the visuals are nice and decent for the PSP standards. As for Ratchet & Clank Size Matters, the designs are decent enough, but when you compare them to the original games, the game itself looks like a better version of the original Ratchet & Clank. There are a few exceptions like the Dreamtime level, which does look very nice, but I'm gonna have to give it to The Lost Frontier since it put more effort into its designs. But even so, the designs in both games don't help the PSP push its limits in terms of graphics. As for music, Jak and Daxter The Lost Frontier keeps the same deep and atmospheric music that have been heard in the original games. Same goes for Ratchet & Clank Size Matters, as it keeps the same upbeat and catchy songs from the original games. So which is better? Well, I'm gonna give it to Size Matters again. Lost Frontier's music was okay for a spin-off game, but I still wish they could have been just as badass as the songs from Jak 2, Jak 3 and Jak X. That and some songs in Lost Frontier were kinda cliche and easily forgettable. Size Matters, on the other hand, has really catchy and more memorable tunes than Lost Frontier has, so I'm gonna give this one to Size Matters hands down. Now for the boss battles. Just like the music, Lost Frontier and Size Matters still have boss battles reminiscent to the original games. Lost Frontier has you fighting either giant robots or dark eco creatures, and Size Matters has you fighting bosses that are more reminiscent to the original games than Lost Frontier does. Lost Frontier's bosses weren't really as memorable as the ones in Jak 2 and Jak 3. Same can be said for Size Matters. I have to say though, the final bosses are what really shine of all the boss battles in both games, but in choosing on which game had a better final boss, I would have to say Lost Frontier, because even though it was frustrating, it did become more intense when you were taking down Skyheat, but I still have to admit the fight with auto-destruct at the end of Size Matters did remind me a little bit of Dr. Nefarious from the Up Your Arsenal, just a little bit, so just for the final boss alone, I'll give this one to Lost Frontier. Now we're at the final part, which is gameplay. Lost Frontier's gameplay is similar to Jak 2 and Jak 3, but with major differences. For one, some of your old moves like the long jump and high jump have been stripped in this game. However, most of the game is now using a plane to get from location to location, and you can customize your plane while buying new ones just like in Jak X. You still have your weapons from the sequels like the scattergun, the blaster and the Falcon Fury. However, each time you come across an eco idol in each level, you will obtain a new eco power. There's green eco, which creates platforms and obstacles against enemies, red eco, which launches a large eco ball and shooting it will perform a big explosion, yellow eco, which helps you hover across gaps, and blue eco, which both slows down time and teleports you. I have to admit, this kinda reminds me of the eco power-ups from the first Jak and Daxter game, even though they're not as memorable as the ones in the first game. You can also upgrade your attacks and weapons by visiting Kira at any time, providing you have some dark eco to buy these upgrades. I'll be honest though, I am not a fan of the combat in this game. I found it quite stiff and frustrating at times, but even more frustrating when they throw more enemies at you non-stop in some levels. Another thing that bothered me were the dogfight levels. They're not that bad, but they are really irritating because you have to rely on yourself on trying to take down giant ships while protecting yourself, and it's just so annoying. But my least favourite part of the game has to be playing as Jak Daxter. Oh my god, I hated these levels. I mean, I just found them too linear and the enemies can be really hard to kill because the levels are too crammed in and losing dark eco is twice as faster. God, and people thought Sonic as the Werehog was bad. Now for Ratchet Clank Size Matters. Even though Size Matters plays more like the original Ratchet Clank and less like the sequels, the game does keep the nanotech leveling system, so you can still upgrade your weapons and increase your health bar. You do have a variety of weapons in this game like any other Ratchet Clank game, and most of them are pretty fun to use. There is also a variety of armor, but instead of buying them from vendors, they are instead hidden in various levels, and each of these armors offer their own unique advantage and protection. One new feature added to this game is the shrink ray, which can be used to shrink yourself and to unlock doors and various other situations. There are also some new gadgets introduced like the Sprout-O-Matic, which can be used to create plants and use them as platforms or slingshots. Clank does return as a playable character and still controls gadget bots, but this only happens once in the game. However, there are challenges in which Clank himself can participate, which include robot fights and puzzle solving for you to win a large number of bolts, kinda like the Gladiator boss fights. The game also brings back skyboarding from the original Ratchet Clank, where you can earn more bolts and new gadgets. I sure did enjoy the creative platforming they added to this game and kept it true to the original games. If there were any complaints I had, it would be that the skyboarding races were not as fun as before and the lack of variety. So overall, these two games are decent enough spin-offs for the PSP, but if I had to choose the winner, I'm gonna have to go with Ratchet Clank Size Matters, mainly because it had a lot of things in the game that kept it true to the original games as possible, even though the future series would later surpass it after that. Jak and Daxter The Lost Frontier, in my opinion, is a disappointment. Don't get me wrong, it's a fairly average spin-off game, and there were some moments that I did enjoy, but when you compare it to the original games, it feels like high-impact games didn't even try to make this game as good as the original games. So the winner is Ratchet Clank Size Matters. That wraps up another episode of Video Game Battle. Hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in the next video.